It all started when I got the worst news of my life. I needed surgery. Urgent. Unavoidable. My health was deteriorating fast, and without the procedure, I wouldn't be able to care for my two little angels, my twins, Liam and Ella. I was terrified. The thought of leaving my babies even for a short while sent me into a panic. But I reassured myself. My parents, their grandparents, would step up. They'd always talked about family values, about how blood was thicker than water. I was wrong. When I asked them for help, my mother let out an annoyed sigh. My father didn't even look up from his phone. Then came the words that shattered me. "You always bring your problems to us. You're such a nuisance." I couldn't believe it. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking for anything except to watch their own grandchildren while I fought for my life. "You chose to have kids. They're your responsibility," my father added coldly. I stared at them, my stomach twisting. I wasn't some irresponsible teenager who dumped her kids on them. I was a mother facing surgery, and all I needed was a little help. But no. To them, I was nothing more than a burden. And that was the moment I knew. I would never forgive them. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 27 years old, a single mother of two beautiful 3-year-old twins, Liam and Ella. Their father, Jason, walked out on us before they were even born, leaving me to fend for myself. But that was fine. I had my parents, or so I thought. My mother, Margaret Carter, and my father, Richard Carter, were the kind of people who loved to show off their perfect family to the outside world. But behind closed doors, they saw me as nothing more than a mistake they were forced to deal with. Even as a child, I knew they never wanted me. My mother constantly reminded me that I was an accident and that I ruined her life plans. My father, cold and distant, never showed me an ounce of affection. But despite everything, I had always tried to earn their love. Now, as I sat in their living room, pleading with them to watch their grandchildren for just a few days while I underwent surgery, I realized the truth. They never loved me. Margaret scoffed and crossed her arms. "You're always asking for something, Olivia. It's exhausting." Richard sighed and shook his head. "We're retired. We've done our part raising you. Now you expect us to babysit? That's not our responsibility." My heart pounded in my chest. "Dad, please. I have no one else. I'm going under the knife. I won't even be able to move for days. They're your grandchildren." He just shrugged. "Not my problem." Tears welled up in my eyes as my mother rolled hers dramatically. "You always make things so dramatic. You'll be fine. Besides, if you can't take care of them, maybe you shouldn't have had them in the first place." That was it. The final stab to my heart. I wasn't just being denied help, I was being discarded, like my pain didn't matter, like my children didn't matter. I left their house that day feeling something I had never felt before. Not sadness, not disappointment. Pure, burning hatred. They had turned their backs on me when I was at my weakest. And one day, I was going to make them regret it. I stumbled out of my parents' house, barely holding back the tears. The weight of their words crushed me, but I didn't have time to break down. I had only a few days left before my surgery, and I needed a solution. I called everyone I could think of, friends, old coworkers, even neighbors. But no one could take in 2 toddlers for several days on such short notice. My last hope was my younger brother, Daniel Carter. He had always been the golden child, the one my parents adored. He never did anything wrong in their eyes, and they spoiled him endlessly. But despite that, we had always been close growing up. Maybe, just maybe, he would help me. I called him, my hands shaking. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Liv, what's up?" His voice was casual, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. "Danny, I need you," I choked out, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have to get surgery. and Mom and Dad refused to watch the twins. Please, I have no one else. There was a long pause. Then, in a hesitant voice, he said, I don't know, Liv. I'm really busy with work, and I have plans this weekend. I gripped the phone tighter. Danny, I'm not asking for a favor. I'm begging. I don't have a choice. Another pause. Then he sighed. Look, I get that this sucks, but you should have figured something out earlier. I can't just drop everything for you. His words hit harder than I expected. My own brother, the one person I thought would stand by me, was turning his back on me too. Wow, I whispered. You sound just like them. Come on, Olivia. Don't be like that. I hung up before he could finish. That was the moment I realized the truth. I had no one. If I wanted to survive this, I had to do it alone. But I also made myself a promise that day. My family had abandoned me when I was at my weakest. One day, I'd return the favor. And when I did, they would understand exactly what it felt like to be left behind. I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the clock. The surgery was in 48 hours, and I still had no one to watch my babies. Liam and Ella sat on the floor, playing with their stuffed animals, completely unaware of the nightmare I was living. I couldn't let them see me cry. I had to be strong for them. But inside, I was falling apart. My parents had turned their backs on me. My brother, who I once thought would always be there for me, had abandoned me too. I had exhausted every option. There was no money for a nanny, no kind soul willing to help. And that's when the fear turned into something darker. Hatred. Pure, unfiltered hatred for the people who had pushed me to this point. But I didn't have time to dwell on that now. I still had to survive this. I made a desperate choice. I called a local emergency daycare center and explained my situation. They agreed to take the twins for a few days, but it came at a cost. More than half my savings. I swallowed the pain of it and transferred the money. My babies would be safe. That was all that mattered. The night before my surgery, I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my mother's sneer, my father's indifference, my brother's excuses. They had left me to suffer. One day I would return the favor, but first, I had to get through tomorrow. The hospital smelled sterile, the bright lights making my headache worse. As the nurse prepped me for surgery, she asked, "Is your family here?" I let out a bitter laugh. Number. It's just me. I had listed Daniel as my emergency contact, but deep down I knew he wouldn't show up, and I was right. When I woke up, groggy and in pain, I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages. They hadn't even bothered to check if I was alive. The doctor told me I'd need a few weeks to fully recover, but I knew I wouldn't have that luxury. I had to pick up my babies in 3 days, and I had no one to help me through the pain. I forced myself to stand, my stitches screaming in protest. I had no choice but to keep moving. But as I limped out of that hospital, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. Done begging. Done hoping they would change. If they wanted to treat me like a burden, I would show them what that truly felt like. They had abandoned me at my lowest. Now it was time to take everything from them. The pain was unbearable, but I had no choice but to push through it. Every step felt like a knife stabbing into my side, but I had to pick up my twins from the daycare. No one else was going to do it for me. I signed the release forms with shaky hands, my body still weak from the surgery. When I saw Liam and Ella's faces light up as they ran toward me, I forced a smile. They were my strength, the only thing keeping me from collapsing under the weight of my exhaustion. I carried them home, each step a battle against the agony in my body. But the real pain wasn't just physical. It was the knowledge that the people who were supposed to love me had left me to suffer alone. That night, as I lay in bed with my babies curled up beside me, something inside me hardened. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my parents' love, trying to prove I was worth something to them. But they had made it clear I was nothing to them, so they would become nothing to me. No more calls, no more visits, no more pretending we were family. But cutting them off wasn't enough. They needed to feel what I felt. They needed to understand what it was like to be abandoned, powerless, and desperate. They had thrown me away like garbage. I was going to show them what that truly felt like. Weeks passed, and my body slowly healed, but my heart never did. The bitterness inside me only grew stronger. I started watching my parents closely, taking note of every little thing they depended on me for. My mother had always called whenever she needed help setting up her ridiculous charity events. My father had relied on me to run errands when he was too lazy to do them himself. And then there was Daniel, Golden Boy, their pride and joy. He had been their favorite, yet he lived off their money without a second thought. He wasn't as self-sufficient as he pretended to be. They all thought I was the burden, but the truth was, they needed me more than they realized. So I let them. For months, I played the role of the obedient daughter, answering their calls, helping when needed, but never giving more than the bare minimum. I let them believe I was still desperate for their approval, until the moment was right. And then, one by one, I started pulling away. At first, it was subtle. I ignored my mother's calls when she needed help with an event. I forgot to run an important errand for my father. I let Daniel deal with his own problems for once. The cracks began to show. Margaret grew frustrated when she couldn't rely on me. Richard snapped when I ignored his demands. Daniel, who had never faced real hardship, began panicking when things didn't go his way. They had built their lives on the assumption that I would always be there to clean up their messes. And now they were beginning to realize what it felt like to be truly alone, just like they had left me. The first real sign of their downfall came when my mother showed up unannounced at my apartment. She looked frazzled, her usual air of superiority replaced with something close to desperation. She claimed it was just a visit, but I knew better. She needed something. I let her ramble, nodding along as she complained about how exhausting it was to manage her upcoming charity gala without my help. She had grown so used to me handling everything for her that she had no idea how to manage on her own. When she finally got to the point, asking me to just stop by for a few hours to help, I smiled and told her I was too busy. The shock on her face was priceless. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that family helps each other. But the words were hollow coming from her. I simply shrugged and told her the same thing she once told me. Not my problem. The realization hit her like a slap. She left in a huff, but I could see the cracks forming. Next was my father. He called a week later, barking about how he needed me to handle some paperwork for him. I let him rant, then casually reminded him that he had made it clear I was on my own. If I was such a burden, why was he asking me for help now? Silence. Then an annoyed grunt before he muttered something about me being ungrateful and hung up. Daniel was the worst off. He had always lived under the illusion that he was independent, but in reality, he had relied on our parents' support at every turn. When they started struggling without my help, he felt it too. And then the inevitable happened. A month later, my parents called me together. Their voices were softer now, almost hesitant. They wanted to talk. They had started feeling the weight of everything I had once carried for them. The things they dismissed as insignificant had now become impossible burdens. I knew what they wanted: to mend things, to pull me back in so I could fix their problems again. But I wasn't that person anymore. This was only the beginning. They hadn't even begun to suffer the way I had. Not yet. Their call had been predictable, a weak attempt at manipulation. But I wasn't stupid. I knew they didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of having me at their beck and call. So, I ignored them. Days turned into weeks, and their situation grew worse. My mother's charity event turned into a disaster. Mismanaged funds, missed deadlines, and vendors refusing to work with her after years of her entitled attitude. Without me running damage control, everything crumbled. My father, who prided himself on his independence, found himself drowning in overdue bills and forgotten appointments. His once carefully managed routine fell apart, and he had no idea how to put it back together. Daniel, spoiled and dependent, was hit the hardest. My parents had always shielded him from real responsibility, but now that they were too busy dealing with their own problems, he was on his own. The money he had been coasting on began to dry up. His business ventures failed without me there to clean up his messes, and for the first time in his life, he tasted failure. Real, soul-crushing failure. It was glorious. And yet, they still refused to acknowledge what they had done to me. Then came their final act of desperation. One evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, all three of them stood there. My mother, my father, and Daniel. Their expressions were tight with forced humility. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to beg. It was almost funny, watching them struggle to ask for help without outright admitting they needed it. My mother spoke first, her voice strained. She said they'd been thinking a lot about family lately, how important it was to stick together. My father, clearly uncomfortable, added that maybe they had been too harsh before. Daniel, looking thinner and more exhausted than I had ever seen him, didn't even bother with pretense. He just asked if I could lend him some money. I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying their discomfort. Then I smiled. The same empty, dismissive smile they had given me when I was begging for help. "I'd love to help," I said, my voice dripping with mock sympathy. "But you know, I'm just so busy. You understand, right?" Their faces crumbled. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father clenched his jaw, and Daniel looked like he wanted to scream. I shut the door in their faces. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being discarded. They were. And it felt amazing. But I wasn't done yet. Their suffering had only just begun. Shutting the door in their faces should have been satisfying enough. But it wasn't. Not yet. They had left me to struggle when I needed them most. Now they had the nerve to come crawling back, expecting me to fix their mess. I had no intention of helping them. I had one final lesson to teach them, the lesson of complete and utter abandonment. Over the next few months, I made sure their downfall was absolute. My mother's reputation in her social circle crumbled beyond repair. Without me handling her events, word spread about her incompetence. Donations dried up, and her so-called friends, who were only there for the status, began to distance themselves. My father, once so proud and respected, was humiliated when his financial failures became public knowledge. He had no idea how to manage on his own, and his stubbornness kept him from asking for real help. He had always looked down on people who struggled. Now, he was one of them. And Daniel? He fell the hardest. He had always relied on me in ways he never realized. He had no real skills, no drive, and no backup plan. When my parents could no longer fund his lifestyle, he spiraled. He lost everything: his apartment, his business, even his so-called friends who had only stuck around for his money. One night, I got a text from him. "I was wrong. Please, Liv, I need you." For a brief moment, I hesitated. Despite everything, a part of me still remembered the brother I had once been close to. But then I remembered the way he had ignored my cries for help, the way he had dismissed me like I was nothing. I deleted the message without replying. And just like that, I erased them from my life completely. I no longer hated them. I no longer cared about them at all. They had chosen to leave me behind when I was at my weakest. Now, I had done the same to them. And this time, there was no coming back. The cycle was broken. I was finally free.